so the CNN people came after Joe Rogan. And
yes, did they? I didn't hear.
Yeah. And one of them said, essentially, man, what's going on here? We've got this whole bureaus devoted to fact checking and the truth, and all these experts hired, and why the hell aren't people listening to us when they listen to Joe Rogan and he's just winging it? And I thought, just winging it, eh? You try just winging it in front of 11 million people for 5 years and see if you're still standing, buddy. You think just winging it is so easy. Well, first of all, why aren't you doing it if it's so damn easy? And second, isn't it something that with all your resources, you can only garner like 1/10 of the audience of one man who has like zero production expertise in his studio. He just puts it all out online. And all he does is have honest conversations. I mean, insofar as he's capable of that. You know, Joe stumbles and he knows that and admits it. And sometimes he gets too, buttoned down on a given point. But fundamentally, he's just trying to do what we're doing here, which is to have
to just say, leave him alone. Whoever wants to listen to Joe, go listen to Joe, for goodness sakes. And
yeah, well, part of me now thinks, hey, keep at it, guys. Every time you attack him, 1 million more subscribers for Joe. They kick him off Spotify. He would have a new platform like in 2 days with twice as many listeners. And so Joe's got to the point where, as long as he continues to be careful, and he is being, I don't think he can be canceled. In fact, I think all the attempts to cancel him only redound to his credit and increase the rapidity with which he's destroying the entire legacy media.
Mm-hmm. This issue of canceling is so abhorrent to me in a democracy. All of this legislation that focuses on, hate speech and limiting what can be said on the internet. And what's so ironic about it is that, as you might know, John Stuart Mill, who was, one of the fathers of utilitarianism and very often invoked in this current sort of collectivist setting with the mandates, right? He himself was an advocate for free speech, because he said that the problem with squashing free speech, it's not just that you might learn something new that you didn't know, but you have the opportunity to put your own beliefs under the microscope and to think about new reasons why you might believe or don't believe them. So even on the metric that a collectivist, arguably a consequentialist, a utilitarian like John Stuart Mill is using, canceling censorship is not good for humans, let alone democracies that have free speech as one of their fundamental pillars.
Well, the only real rationale for opposing free speech, apart from ignorance, which is that you don't know that free speech isn't just another right, and you don't know it's indistinguishable from thought, is the conclusion that you've already figured it all out. So you don't have to think.
Or you're trying to hide something.
Well, that's the other possibility. But those two things go hand in hand very frequently. Is that it's very often that people who are trying to hide something justify that to themselves with a kind of totalitarian certainty about their beliefs. They double down on them to hide their own moral iniquities. And so you have to believe that people like Rogan shouldn't be allowed to just have a discussion with whoever they want and wing it. And you think that because you think you already know. And, if your life is perfect and you're already living in the kingdom of God, and then more power to you, maybe you're right. And you can shut down free discourse because the heavenly heights have already been scaled. But I haven't met anyone like that yet. Most people I know think with not too much thought that there's some things they still have to learn and some ways their lives could be improved. And how are we going to approach that? Especially, you want to find out how you're wrong. You should talk to people who don't agree with you. Now, maybe 90% of what they say is not worth attending to, could easily be. Probably the same goes for you. But 10% might be just what saves you in the next crisis. This is one of the things I loved about being a clinician, is that I talked to lots of people who were really different than me, like seriously different from me. And if I wasn't learning something from them when I was in discourse with them, it was because I wasn't conducting the discourse properly. So
And
they
if
taught me
nothing
invaluable
else,
things. Mhm.
even if you don't learn truth, even if you don't learn more reasons for why your position was right, at the very least, you have benefited from a very rigorous mental exercise.
Yeah, well, that helps you, as you said already. You want to differentiate and assess your own beliefs. Well, why? Well, because your beliefs aren't a set of facts at your disposal. Your beliefs are tools that you use to navigate the world. And the more finely tuned those tools, the more different. Like, I have a shed at home, a shop with all sorts of power tools in it. And one of the things I learned, because I've renovated houses a number of times, one of the things I've learned is that if the job is difficult, you don't have the right tool. And then you can go down to Home Depot, which has like 50,000 square feet of tools, which is just phenomenal. And you can find some little gadget that somebody spent half their lifetime devising that makes that job easy. Well, that's ideas. Ideas are tools. They're not facts.
And you have to sharpen them and take care of
Mm.
them and keep
And
them from being
differentiate them.
rusty and
You
put them
bet.
away in the right way,
And
right? Like the
maintain them. You bet.
metaphor is beautiful. You know, it
Mm.
seems like, so talking about both the truckers situation and then the Joe Rogan situation, it seems in many respects like intellectuals or elites have gotten us into this mess. And it's the truckers and the Joe Rogans of the world that are getting us out of it, arguably.
Mm.
You know, what does this say about education and academia and civil discourse and democracy moving forward?
Well, it says that the highest and the lowest always have to be united. And what that means in some
Pretty
sense
beautiful.
is that, well, I learned that in part from watching Wagner's Die Meistersinger, the opera, because the libretto elaborates on that theme in an absolutely stellar manner. Because in his opera, the opera details out the actions of guilds of men. And so each guild is made out of domain experts. So one of the heroes is a cobbler who's an expert shoemaker. You think, well, who cares? He makes shoes. It's like, well, you have good shoes, so that isn't a concern of yours. But if you didn't, you'd think it was very important. And if you're a good enough cobbler, you get to sing. And if you're a good enough singer, you get to elect a master singer. It's a lovely structured sequence of metaphors. And so one of the things Wagner did so well in that opera was to point out that true expertise means the differentiation of abstract knowledge all the way down to the point of behavioral implementation. And it's one thing I really like about being trained as a behavioral psychologist. I'm very interested in psychoanalytic theory, but it's very abstract. Existential psychology, it's very abstract, meaning of life stuff. It's like, yeah, but where does the rubber hit the road? Well, the truckers know that. Right? They really know that because they're down there moving goods to people. They're doing the actual work in the most fine-grained manner. Now, they might have a problem with high order articulation, and it's up to their leaders to
I'm not so
provide
sure
that.
about that.
Well, I'm not so sure either. They
I
don't have a
challenge every Canadian to get themselves there and talk to some of these truckers.
Yeah.
I think they'd be very surprised.
they don't have trouble with enunciating blunt truths. But you were pointing to problems among the intellectuals. Well, the intellectual chattering class is criticizing the truckers. There's a divorce between the intellectualized framework, ethical framework, and that practical reality that the working class people represent.
Yeah.
And I mean, your observation that the truckers and the Joe Rogans are serving as redemptive agents is a reflection of the idea of the brilliance of individual sovereignty, the notion of individual sovereignty as the basis for political stability. It's like, well, who should you consult? Well, not just the people with the ideas, the people who drive the trucks. Well, why? Because they're navigating the roads, they're delivering the goods in the real sense.
Talking
And so
to the
they know
people.
things.
They're-
Yeah, you bet. Well, and they are the people. They have their families. Their life is real. It's not abstracted to the point where the abstractions themselves become a problem.
It seems like they're almost like a litmus test for how we're doing and the things that we're getting wrong. And they're showing us in the face, look, it's almost like like a boil that's finally erupting. Look, these are the problems, right? We would have kept silent if you didn't screw things up so much, but now we have real problems. You're not fixing them.
Yeah, well, you saw the same thing with the Yellow Jackets in France. It's like corrupt energy policies started to make energy too expensive for ordinary people. It's like, well, we have to save the planet. It's like, well, how about not on our backs there, guys? And so, and we're going to see a lot more of that, I suspect, especially if the elite types and their utopian schemes, if the elite types with their utopian schemes keep walling themselves off from the people that they hypothetically represent. This is why the UK jumped out of, this is why the UK voted for Brexit. It's like the common people thought, no, too abstract, too much of a Tower of Babel. The leaders have got too far away from the people they represent. And I think they made the right decision. So more power to Rogan and the truckers.